Welcome, everyone, to another Experience Matters with Eric Newton. Today we have Bob Brookover, professor, faculty member over in the PRTM department at Clemson University. Welcome, Bob.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So Bob and I go way back. We've known each other for a very long time. He's a lot older than me, but we've been friends for a long time. He's been in the area for a really long time. So Bob, tell us how you got to Clemson.
Well, I grew up in Virginia and wanted to go south for college and wanted to go somewhere big and far enough away that my parents couldn't pop in the afternoon and surprise me. So I was looking at Georgia, Florida State, and Florida at the time. And some friends of my parents that had gone to Clemson said, "Hey, you ought to stop at Clemson. Going to pass it right when you go into the University of Georgia." And I said, "What in the heck is Clemson?" I really had no idea, I'd maybe kind of heard of it. And we stopped, fell in love with it. Didn't even apply to any of the other three places.
Wow.
At the end. And so got accepted. It was funny. I was talking in one of my classes the other day. And a lot of times in the beginning of the semester, I'll do a little Clemson history stuff. And as I was talking to him the other day, I was talking about the act of acceptance with Thomas Green Clemson's will. And I think that was accepted on Christmas Eve of 1888. And I think we had been out of town, and I got my acceptance letter to Clemson on Christmas Eve of 1988. So exactly 100 years later, and didn't put that together until the other day, but I remember it being Christmas Eve and it would have been 1988.
Wow.
So that was kind of cool. So got dropped off here. I was still 17 for the first month or so. We were in school on August 20th of 1989 and did my undergrad. I started out as a business major. Finance, didn't like that a whole lot. And I took what I call my sabbatical after my sophomore year, where I had to, I went home and got some gen ed credits out of the way for a semester and evaluated my future and seriousness about education, and came back after one semester, and I changed my major to PRTM at that point. So graduated with an undergrad degree in PRTM, stayed and got my master's. I was a grad assistant at FIKE in campus recreation.
I think that's when we met. When you were
probably,
yeah,
probably, and got done with that. It became a full-time job about the time I was getting done with my master's, a little bit after that. But I decided I wanted to stick around and do a PhD. And at that point, I thought I wanted to be kind of like a dean of students type person. So my PhD is actually in higher ed administration, and so. Did that full time for about 6 years or so over at Campus Recreation, and slowly worked on my PhD, finished that up in 2002. But in 2001, got the opportunity to move over to PRTM as a faculty member. I'd been teaching a class or so a semester for them while I was in Campus Recreation. And so moved over there in 2001 and have, it's been a really interesting career. Being a faculty member is a great kind of deal. You get to get involved in a lot of different things. I've been able to kind of reinvent myself, chasing, different things from a research and consulting perspective over the years. And then, you're getting to teach and hang around with young people that somewhat keeps you young and engaged. And what I like about Clemson and being a land grant is that mission of going out and helping communities and those types of things. So over the years, got to stay engaged with the field of parks, recreation, tourism, sport management, and worked with a lot of different cities and counties and nonprofits and organizations over the years. So have been on faculty now 20-something years, 24 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it is. It's gone by in the blink of an eye, and seems like 1,000 years ago too. At the same time, it's one of those crazy things.
And now you're getting close to retiring, right?
Plan is I'm going to retire this year. I'm really thinking about last semester that I'm teaching right now, but I have a few things that I could probably finish up over the summer from a research perspective, and I'm kind of evaluating that right now. But if I do stick around over the summer and again, finish up some things. I think I'm going to go ahead and make my retirement date August 20th, because I don't know. I remember that also, but the day I got dropped off as a 17-year-old was August 20th in 1989. So just like bookend it with August 20th, 1989.
Oh, that would be cool.
August 20th of 2025. And then I can say, hey, 36 years of college down the drain.
Well, so what do you plan to do with yourself after you? I was going to say graduate. What do you plan to do after you retire?
They finally made me choose a major. I got to graduate now. Finally, after all these years. Still,
what are you going to do when you grow up?
Yeah, still no clue whatsoever. Still evaluating what I'm going to do. Default is to, I could crank up outside consulting. Again, working with city and county governments, mostly all over the country, doing strategic planning and economic impact analysis and those types of studies, economic development. And so might do that, and, looking around, open. Anybody out there that has a job that they want a person that spent 36 years in college, anything interesting, I'm open to anything. I'll still be 53 at that point, and we've got a sophomore in high school, so I'll have to do something semi-legitimate until she graduates through college.
Yeah, until she gets through college.
She gets through college. Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about like some of the consulting gigs that you've done and been a part of. Like, what have been some of the best ones, the worst ones? I mean, you mentioned like doing economic impact studies and things like that. I know for a fact that you got to go to the Heritage every year for a very long period of time. That one's very interesting to me, and I know you have fun with that. But give me an idea of some of the things that you've done over the past however many years.
Yeah. So, you mentioned the RBC Heritage. I only semi joke that the RBC Heritage is one of the most long-term relationships I've had in my life. And starting in, I think 1999 was the first time Clemson was involved in that study, and a couple other faculty members, the Backmans and Bill Norman, were doing that. And, they got me a little bit involved. And so the RBC Heritage, if you don't know what that is, it's, PGA Tour event that's down on Hilton Head. It's been, I think when we started out, it was maybe the MCI Heritage was the sponsor at that point. And then it became the Verizon. I think Verizon took over, and then RBC now. But what we do is we do an economic impact analysis and a kind of market analysis study for them. Every 5 years is when we actually go and we collect the data. We just did it again this year in 2024. So that's been a great relationship. And again, I mean, that thing has had a massive impact on, it's an important thing for Hilton Head. It's in a shoulder season, it's usually late March, April that tournament happens. And it's, things are a little more year round now, but that kind of big event with that many people coming into town and spending money, businesses have come through the winter when things are slower, and then you get this big, hit. Then spring breaks and things like that when kids are there. But then, until you get to May and the bulk of tourist season, that's an important event that kind of kicks off the tourist season for them. It's also,
it's right after the Masters, right?
Yeah. And it's the week after the Masters, and, it's kind of cool. It's one of those things, like they say about, what's the horse race down in,
Aiken?
No, the one in Camden that everybody goes to cheer. Yeah. Over in that area.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, it's like, who invited all these golfers to our party? So, it's a nice laid back, the golfers, after coming down off, the stress of the week of the Masters, are pretty laid back.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really, really fun event to go to.
It is a lot of fun. It's like a giant cocktail party.
Yeah.
On the golf course.
It really, it is. It's absolutely great. And, so, that's been a great, study. I think we did, 1999. Then I think we did 2005, 2010. Then they did occasionally as sponsorships were changing, they moved it up. So I think we did 2014, 19, and 24. And it's grown even with, it flattened out a little bit when you adjusted for inflation, but and was interesting this time, last study in 2019, and then you had COVID, where obviously they had a little bit of a restriction on what they were doing for a couple of years, and came back, and it came back strong this year. Like it hadn't been bad; it had just leveled out a little bit. But it came back pretty strong, and even adjusting for inflation, they had a ton of growth in the amount of impact. I think it was 134 million off the top of my head, total input or output. When you think about, the direct spending when you're down there and you spend money on your Airbnb or your hotel and, eating and drinking and playing golf and everything else you do when you're down there for the trip. Plus then you have those indirect and induced effects as well, where indirect effects are the businesses, have a bit of an influx of new income that week, and they're spending that money, in the economy. And then the induced effects are the employees. So I always say that, saving money is really, really bad for the economy. You got to spend money.
Yeah.
Is good for the economy. So the induced effects are the employees. When the waiter or waitress, gets a couple $100 extra in tips, in a night and, over the course of the week, you don't want them to be responsible with that money. You want them to go out and spend that on things that they would have because they've got that windfall. So those are the induced effects, and you get those spend through effects as well from the direct expenditures.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah.
Those kind of expenditures. And, the money cycles through the economy for, a couple of years from that one event. So it's been, again, that's been a really, really great group of people to work with as well. The group, Steve Wilmot and Angela and everybody down there that runs that tournament. It's a year-round job. If you don't know, PGA Tour is also just a giant charity. Almost every single PGA Tour event is run by a local nonprofit who takes the proceeds from that event, that, the money that's left over, that they've made from ticket sales and sponsorships and everything else after they pay the purse and their expenses. And they take that money that they've made and they donate that to local charities. Mm-hmm. And they have another event or two throughout the year, but that the Heritage Classic Foundation, their board of directors, does a really, really good job and has a really big impact on the Low Country.
Yeah. So that's a big one, and that's an exciting one. Give us an example of some of the ones, like dealing with some of the smaller municipalities that are trying to get infusions of capital to their recreation departments and things like that. Give us some examples of those kind of things.
Yeah. So have worked with big towns, big cities to small towns. I really I like the small town jobs that we get and the consulting and the research that we do, because, I grew up mostly almost exclusively in smaller towns and smaller communities. Winchester, where I grew up, was 25,000 people.
What do you call it? Winchesterton Fieldville?
Winchesterton Fieldville. Yeah. What was that movie? That was one of those Adam Sandler movies, right? Yeah. Winchesterton Fieldville, Iowa, but Winchester, Virginia. Small town, grew up in mostly in the Shenandoah Valley, lived in, little towns there. My dad was a Methodist minister, so we moved around a good bit, but I really like that small town, rural development kind of thing. Right now, working on a team that we are doing some work in, like Bishopville and Walterboro, where we're helping them, think through kind of comprehensively of a number of initiatives that they could take to help, towns that are, they're doing okay, but, they're a little bit stagnant right now, which is strange to think. South Carolina has been the fastest growth rate state in the country for the last 2 years. And up here in the I-85 corridor, we're right exactly dead center in one of the fastest growing regions in the entire world right now. But there are still places in South Carolina that are remaining flat or even declining. So, for example, in Bishopville, the Department of Commerce is funding a few of these towns to help them kind of do some catalyst projects. And so, you think about a lot of downtowns that have done things to help create events and event spaces that get people to downtown. Then you get businesses there, kind of like if you watch the, what does Knox White call it now? It's probably the 30 or 40-year overnight success story.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they really started with downtown again, was events and event spaces downtown and getting people
Right.
to show up. So we're doing a little bit of that work right now with places like Walterboro and Bishopville, and those are really rewarding to watch. This is going to seem weird to say now, but Spartanburg County, for example, is another kind of long-term, relationship that I've done a whole lot of work over there in the last 20 years or so. And when we started, 2005, 6, working over in Spartanburg County, Spartanburg and County, they were just kind of they felt like the, stepchild of Greenville, and, things weren't where they are today, with the announcements recently with baseball and that kind of stuff. They were just kind of struggling to kind of find their identity and find their way again. And man, that place has
really taken off.
You go look back at what Spartanburg and Spartanburg County was in 2005 and 2008. Again, it had gone through some decline, and man, they have done all the right things along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that place is just, hitting on all cylinders. And no offense to anybody in Greenville that I know, but man, they're kicking Greenville's butt right. And Greenville grew and is still growing and doing well, but I mean, Spartanburg has done a really, really great job in knowing where they came from and watching what's happened over the last, about 20 years there. I mean, that one's been really, really, neat and fun to watch and remain involved.
And you did a lot of work.
We started with back in like the mid, 2005, 6, 7, the state did a big statewide tourism action plan. And then they wanted counties to do county level tourism action plans, and that lined them up to be eligible for grant dollars and those types of things. And we started with a tourism action plan over there. And when we did that, having gotten really interested and, figured out economic impact analysis, we built them some kind of data tools like a ground up economic impact analysis thing that they could use to kind of track their success. We developed a whole lot of, recommendations. We did a branding strategy for them. A lot of communities go through this, but, you live there and you're sitting there and you don't know what you have around you and all the great stuff that you have. So a big part of that initial process was to say, all right, well, if you bring someone to town, if you have guests in town, what are you going to do? And you almost have to do like, in the tourism world, they call them fam tours, where you'll bring people into a destination,
Mm-hmm.
Go around and show them all the stuff. And it's like, we need to do local fam tours with you all, because y'all have all this great stuff that is just kind of sitting here, but it's not organized well. So a lot of it was like kind of organizing, packaging, creating kind of products that you could then go out and market. They had also, they had just done Tiger River Park, which was extremely helpful, the big Diamond Field baseball, softball complex.
Mm-hmm.
So they were having some success there with sport tourism. But I mean, the music, arts, culture, all of those things over there, some outdoor things. I mean, they just had so many assets. They just needed to like kind of get that nudge to get going. And again, their downtowns come alive. They just announced baseball. They had multiple hotels built, downtown and convention center. And I think there's, more movement there. They've done they did their pennies for roads years ago and just re-up that. And, their schools, they've done so many great things over there, and have been lucky. They kept me involved, and they're probably responsible for me kind of getting into some areas, outside of parks, recreation, and tourism management, the economic impact analysis. Be like, hey, can you and your guy over at Clemson, Rob Carey, who worked with for years, can y'all, find the data and run some analysis on this other type of project that's, some economic development, bringing in a business, so we've done the trail things over there. If you've, Saluda Grade Trail, which obviously is related to recreation, but just recently we did a economic impact study for them for the Saluda Grade Trail. Again, it's been a fun place to work, and can't begin to tell you, like the folks over in Spartanburg and RBC, it's just, you really appreciate those long-term relationships that you have.
And what do you tell a really small town that's trying to revitalize their town, and they may not have those resources that like a Spartanburg would have?
Well, it's I always say, and we did he's our department chair now. Years ago, we went around and we did a study of towns and cities in Parks and Rec that have been really successful, and it's really about getting your first win, and then success builds success, and convincing the decision makers in town that, hey, this is worth investing in. Because for a long time now, we've been in this mode of taxes are bad, no one likes paying taxes. But what we found is that if you show people what they're getting for their money, oftentimes most people are going to support that, and people are really supportive of those things that we do in the Parks, Rec, and tourism world, community assets that make it a great place to live and play and work. And so with small towns, a lot of times it's really hard because, they've got a small tax base. So, helping them get their first grant, helping them, find some sponsorship and alternative methods of funding, and then helping convince them and helping kind of walk through their decision makers on the return on investment with whatever they're thinking about investing in. So that those economic impact pieces and return on investment studies that we do really help, because you can imagine as a council person, they're nervous, like, hey, we're going to raise $2 million of taxes. People are going to go crazy and they're going to vote me out of office. And it rarely and almost never happens.
Right.
So, and it's getting that first win. It's like eating the elephant. Where do you start? What's the first thing that we can do to get that first success that then will, everybody say, all right, we want more
right.
over time.
Tell me how you put together a project like what that one in Spartanburg is called, Upward, or that big sports complex over there.
Yeah.
So tell me how a municipality puts together a big project like that.
Well, that was a private nonprofit group.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Did that.
Okay.
But like for Tiger River Park, for example, they used the hospitality tax in Spartanburg. So they passed the hospitality tax, which is that 2% that you pay on prepared food and beverage. So you go out to a restaurant, you go buy a sub at Publix, those types of things, you get that extra 2%. That stays local. When that's collected, that comes back directly to the city. Actually, we're right next to Nick's. So when Dale, at the end of each month, Dale has to, look at his sales and take his 2%, on his sales for food, beverage, that kind of thing over to the city and pay it. So that generates a good bit of money. And as you can imagine, in a county-wide system, that 2%. So they use that. And a lot of people have used that over the years, the hospitality and accommodations tax, the local portion of the tax on hotels. Hospitality tax generates more money typically than the accommodations tax, but that's been a big source of income that a lot of cities, counties have used to do those kind of things. If a city passes it first, they keep the 2%. If the county passes it first and the city hasn't passed it,
you have to split it.
Yeah, they have to split. Actually, the county, I think, maybe can only collect 1%. I can't remember what the exact rule is, but anyway, you have to split it. So if the county beats a city to passing that, then the city only gets to keep 1%. But if the city beats the county, then the city keeps the 2% in the city limits, and the county gets it outside of that, or it gets 1% in the towns that they beat to the punch. And that's been a frustrating thing in a couple of places, and I won't name any names, but cities will say, well, we don't want to pass that. It's like they have it in the county, you're just leaving, you're just giving them the money right now.
Right. Yeah.
You're just giving it to them. If you pass, you're going to get half of it. And sometimes they just won't they just don't want to pass it, period.
Just out of principle.
Just out of principle. And it's the craziest thing. No one notices. I mean, how many times do you look at your Chick-fil-A bill and say, what the heck? What's this extra 2%?
My wife notices stuff like that. Yeah. She analyzes our bills all the time. She's like, what is this?
Actually, Finn and I went to, we had breakfast at Sunnyside today. And sometimes it's not like, exactly spelled out with the three different, you've got your 6% sales tax. In Pickens County, we have a 1% local option sales tax. That's why we get like a little rebate on our property taxes each year, if you look at that. And then in Clemson, you've got your 2% tax, and they had all three of them. It was 1% local option, 6% sales, 2% hospitality. And again, it's, you think about it, it's 20 cents on a $10 bill. It's $2 on a $100 bill. Most people, you don't notice it, but it generates a lot of money. That fund in the city of Clemson, that 2% generates almost $2 million a year, like high 1 point something million. And, been able to do a lot of stuff with that money in town. And without it, it would, it's not free. Free money is the wrong way to put it, but without it, you'd notice things would go away.
So give me some examples of like what that $2 million is used for in the city of Clemson.
So,
and by the way, for anybody that doesn't know, I'm sure most people know, Bob was a former city councilman. Just finished.
I'm still a former city councilman.
Well,
it's actually my favorite new title, ex-city councilman.
So he served for 4 years and did a great job. But anyway, so give us an example of what that $2 million was used for in the city.
So it's been used for a ton of stuff over time. I can tell you, while one of the reasons that I ran for council, our budget in the city was like very, very messy and convoluted. And Leslie, who is new since I've been on council as our budget director, she would tell you she'd been a budget director for a city in Georgia forever. She's like, I've never seen anything like this. And so one of the things we worked hard to do is kind of untangle all those funds, because they were kind of all, just overlapping and intertwined, and some things didn't make a whole lot of sense. So we worked on that. But for example, we the projects that are going now, the renovations to Clemson Park behind the Methodist Church, where they're going to redo the shelter, and they're going to add a splash pad and the skate park and those kind of things, that's being funded by hospitality tax. The city's portion of which isn't much, because the university gave most of the money for the pickleball courts. I think the pickleball courts were maybe $350,000, the 8 pickleball courts of that project going on at Nettles right now. And the university gave 250 of that.
Oh, wow.
But they're funding that, the expanded parking over at Nettles Park right now. The new dog park, they're adding another dog park at Nettles, because the current one, is a little problematic in the floodplain. So those kind of things, all over the place. It's funded, Green Crescent Trail initiatives over the years. And so right now we were able to untangle that. We were able to kind of increase base funding levels from different places. So that money that was intertwined and maybe was being overspent for the spirit of the law, for example, you can use some of that money for fire and police. Well, we were, in the past, we were paying for like the entire fire truck, out of hospitality tax. You're only really supposed to be paying for like the portion that you can say, hey, we, 20% of our calls are from tourism. So maybe we pay 20%. It's not illegal or anything. It's just, it's convenient, easy to do. So, able to undo that. So we're actually able to open up some headroom in there. So future initiatives, because, like I said, decision makers, elected officials have been, for the last 20 years or more, have been really nervous about, kind of doing things and pushing the envelope, and not even pushing the envelope really, but, Clemson has built up this backlog of needs, and it's not just Parks and Rec. I mean, the city probably has somewhere between, I'd say on the low end, 75 million. It's probably close to 125.
That's the budget
of road, water, sewer, and other infrastructure needs that need to be taken care of over the next 10 to 15 years, because, we've had like a $200,000 paving budget forever. And so, we've got this big backlog of deferred maintenance or things that have gone too long, like, hey, this road should have been paved 10 years ago. We're good on, water pipes and sewer pipe, but, people right now, I'm sure, seeing some of that work going on. But you got to put that on a cycle, because if you don't do it incrementally, then you end up with this giant bill, in front of you. And nothing's less expensive right now than it's
only getting more and more.
It's only getting more and more expensive. So, we have that. So it's important. I think that's the next thing, and I'm hopeful council kind of keeps up some momentum to come up with, and staff's doing a really good job. And they always hated seeing me come, Nathan and Benji and others, when I'd say, hey, what's going on? What's the plan? How are we going to get this into a cycle so we can catch up? My mantra was, we've got to catch up to keep up. And it's not, let's just do it and catch up and stop. Let's do it and get it on a cycle where we can do it incrementally, and even bank a little bit of money. So when we have an emergency and that kind of thing, we don't end up with this big giant elephant of a bill, in front of us that is hard to do.
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue into what I was going to ask you next. Is you've got municipalities that are stagnant, and they need growth, and so they're trying to do things to create economic impact. Part of what you've been doing, and then you've got municipalities like Clemson that it's just growing like crazy, but people want it to stop growing. And I've always used the mantra, like, if you're not growing, you're dying. But you have to have some growth in order to fund all that future. Those future expenses. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that. They're just like, we want Clemson to stay, or we want our town to stay just like it is. We don't want to see any, but that doesn't work. That's a good way to go bankrupt.
And it's a fine sentiment. Like, it's like, hey, I like it the way it is. And that's fine for people to think that, but it's just not realistic. And again, without the growth helping fund, and again, incrementally helping you get more resources to do what you need to do, you're going to be in trouble. Now, now that I'm off council, I'll, let the cat out of the bag, but, we were kind of, I don't want to say it's not sneaky, because we did it out in public, but what most people, a lot of people in Pickens County and the other municipalities don't realize is that because of that 1% local option sales tax, that if you look at your property tax bill, you get that discount. It says like local option sales tax rebate on your property bill.
Yeah.
And when you're booming and doing well, sales have gone up in the city of Clemson. So that 1% on every dollar spent in the city of Clemson, that comes back and reduces our property tax bills. We were able to, in the 4 years I was on council, and the first year it was hard to get people to come along, but they did. I think we raised our tax millage 1.7 mils. Okay. Which is, that might have been, it's nothing, the way that taxes work on a $250,000 house, that's like $30 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And most people in their mortgage, it goes in their escrow account, and it doesn't even change your escrow account, kind of thing. But because of that, because sales were going up and things are going well with that 1%, then the next year, I think we did 5 or 6 mills, and we did another 5 or 6 mills, and we did another few mills last year. My tax bill, and this would be consistent across, everybody. My tax bill over those 4 years only went up like $30 or $40. And we raised taxes, I think, over 16 total mills in 4 years, which is right now about almost $2 million in new revenue. And your tax bill hardly moved because of that local option sales tax deal. Now, there's cities, when you have that local option sales tax that gives you that rebate, cities could be, and counties even, could be doing that with almost zero to no impact. And again, doing those tax increases, that was a little bit lucky that we were able to do that and get a kind of bump. But tax rate in Clemson, I think they'd raised it $1 million a few years before that, but it hadn't been raised in a zillion years. Now, the 5-year point comes up and everything, you get reassessed. People's taxes will, go up, but the state of South Carolina makes you roll that back, almost a neutral, when you have a reassessment year. You can't use that as like a giant windfall. So, but the good and bad news is we're doing well in Clemson. Property values are going to go up. So you're going to get a little bit of natural increase at some point. But that means you're doing well,
right.
As a town. So I know that was a long way to get around to whatever it was that you asked me that I can't even remember now. But, again, that's an important thing to think about. It's like doing things incrementally for a city is really, really important, because if you just I've worked with a ton of towns that are like, oh, we're so proud we haven't raised our tax rate in 35 years. It's like one of these days that's going to just absolutely bite you. Even Greenville, as much growth as they've gotten, they've probably, they're doing well, but you scratch below the surface a little bit in Greenville. There's some potential issues there if they don't change a few things structurally. I think coming, I would be nervous if I was on their council, with kind of the financial underpinnings, because they are absolutely, relying on that growth. And if that growth doesn't occur, they're going to be hurting. So a little bit of incremental, thinking about some other sources of revenue, are good. They're doing great. But there's some things below the surface that I'd be like, there's some fundamental things here that if, you hit a hard bump in the road, you could potentially, you'd have to slow down maybe more than you wanted.
Right.
Kind of going forward.
So that's all really interesting stuff. You're a lot smarter than I thought you were, Bob. No, but no, it's all really interesting.
I just made all of that up.
So no, it's a lot of people don't understand all that, and myself included. I may not understand all the little ins and outs of how governments work and everything, but I do understand economic impact and how certain things can boost local economies. One thing that we're really, really, really fortunate to have here in Clemson. In fact, Clemson would not exist if it weren't for Clemson University. To determine the economic impact of the university would probably be really, really hard, because the university and the city sort of they're almost considered one. They're so close together, they adjoin each other. But then also the athletics, and so I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit about we have a lot of student athletes that come on to our podcast, and we've had discussions about NIL and transfer portal and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's real interesting to see how the landscape of college athletics has changed over the last several years. I mean, with the NIL and everything, and I think, and you know more about this than me, but the NIL, I think everybody would agree was something that needed to happen, but it kind of morphed into to something way different than what it was originally intended to be. Right. And so now universities are stuck with having to, with the collectives, now in addition to like the IPTAs of the world where you're raising money for scholarships, now you're having to raise money for NIL collectives, and you've got businesses that are trying to, or that want to support some of these athletes and through sponsorships and things like that. And so it's really, really changed the landscape of things. And it's kind of, I think it's changed. It's the way obviously Clemson has had to operate its athletic department. And I saw just the other day where they just hired, I can't remember the guy's name, but to run the investment. It's the investment strategies for, because you're seeing a lot of schools that are partnering with private equity groups and things like that. And so, because they're kind of being forced to do that, to run more like a business.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's going to open up the door for, we used to have concerts and things at Little John and Stadium, and we've never had alcohol sales. It looks like that's going to be a thing here soon. And so they're going to have to look for other additional sources of revenue at that level, which could in turn have a tremendous economic impact on the city of Clemson and all the local municipalities. I mean, think you get, when you were in school, they had the Rolling Stones, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Rolling Stones.
First one. That was my freshman year.
Yeah. Yep. Pink Floyd, big name, George Strait.
Yep.
Big names, like getting those
U2.
people. Yeah. U2. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah. It's crazy to think about. But
I saw Ozzy Osbourne in Little John.
Did you really? I bet that was interesting. I hear he's a lot more coherent now than he was back then.
He is. He was
which is hard to believe.
He was in really bad shape. I got to kind of help work that one, and man, it was disappointing. He got out. He was just all, bent over, didn't know where he was. He'd lose his place on the teleprompter because he couldn't remember his lyrics and just start saying, God bless you all, when he'd lose his spot, and then he'd pick back up. It was really disappointing. Like I said, he's in better shape now than he was back then.
Yeah. But I mean, those kind of things could have a tremendous impact. We talk about all the time here in Clemson, and in Central and Pendleton and Seneca, how a lot of these towns they're looking for other.
We've got it built in, kind of, and now that exactly what kind of the path you're going down here. The university is going to get back into that because they're going to have to, and I know they're looking at concerts and other events again in Little John in the stadium. And, we're already seeing it, Savannah Bananas coming. Is that April?
Yeah, I think that's
Savannah
right.
Bananas coming. That'll be like having we've got the
home
spring
football game. Yeah.
It'll be like having a home football game in the spring. And, that is huge for businesses, just walk out the door here and, go over and grab Cameron at Tiger Town and ask them, what that means,
right.
For you, the 7 home football games. What's he say? He says something like, that's where we make the biscuit, all the rest of it's gravy or something like. He has some goofy Cameronism that he says about football games. But, again, having other events like that throughout the year is, just great for business. And that has an effect again on the sales and all those other things that generate revenue for the city. NIL with, my hope is, even though the NIL stuff drives me crazy the way that it's happening right now with the schools. I mean, basically you're getting NIL money for nothing. It should be, I think the revenue share is great, pay them the salary and then have, if the schools are involved in NIL, it's like, hey, the Bob Brookover jersey sold more than whatever our baseline set is. So we had that extra, bump in revenue. We're going to share that with you too. And you could have those kind of bonus levels, and then everything else should be disconnected. And if, Eric Newton Enterprises wants to hire, you said you had Colin on, a week ago, wants to hire Colin, you've got to do that, but then that's got to be disclosed and it's got to be at like a real market rate. I can't go hire, I shouldn't be able to go tell Cade Klubnik, hey, I want you to come to my kid's birthday party for 15 minutes and pay him $500,000. That's not a market rate for,
right.
Cade's not quite there yet.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know who I would pay $500,000 to come to my kid's birthday party. Maybe Taylor Swift, might be in that realm, but it has to be at market rate and disclosed from a university, Clemson kind of thing. Like I was saying earlier, not spending your money and saving your money is bad. I'm hopeful that all the athletes now that are going to get a windfall, man, spend it in the city of Clemson.
Yeah.
That's going to help us, man. You got a ton of money. Go out and spend it here, spend it locally.
Right.
That can be good, but I'm excited. I know that they are in the background, working on those things, alcohol sales in the stadium. I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later in Little John, before basketball season's over potentially. And I would be absolutely shocked if it's not happening in the fall in the football stadium, or even baseball in the spring. It's going to be great.
Well, from a tradition standpoint, I'm not a huge fan, but it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we're probably leaving a lot of revenue on the table by not having alcohol sales.
Yeah.
I think pretty much every other school and big school in the country is doing it.
Pretty much everywhere else. And not that that's a reason to do anything, but it's you're just, it's like the hospitality tax. You're just leaving it on the table by not doing it. So, that, and again, I'm excited. I think the university and the city partnered together on that Clemson Music Fest last year. That's coming back. And I think it's going to be only a matter of time before we see like a stadium show and shows in Little John again, because, there's a lot of stuff going on there with the revenue share, the house settlement that's coming, and all those kind of things. They've got a lot of stuff in front of them in the athletic department at the university that there's going to be a kind of wall to get over,
right?
With this initial round. And then hopefully at some point they fix that kind of structural issue with how schools are involved in NIL. It's just like, hey, here's your NIL deal. That it's like,
right.
What is that? That's not really,
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's sustainable. Like from a business standpoint, like unless you're a oil tycoon that, and you can write a $5 million check and not think twice about it. I mean, it's just, you got to have an ROI. Yeah. So, I mean, I think if they could figure out how to structure it to where you do get an ROI, if you kick money in to help support these collectives or whatnot, I think then it could be really, really big. Then the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah. I am worried a little bit about private equity getting involved in that kind of stuff, because, when it comes, it's going to be all about making money. And I still do truly believe in the mission of like having an athletic program and having a well-rounded athletic program at a university is an important thing, from the experience, that all students and alumni and everyone get from being here. But, and I like, that's one of the things I love about, the way that a lot of our coaches are, and Dabo in particular, is like, we're not, we're preparing you for life and preparing you for 20 years from now and setting you up for long-term success. I'm happy they're getting paid as well. But again, I get really nervous when you start thinking about private equity, because, I mean, give me an example of, when private equities come in somewhere and like it's been like, hey, we're all about the mission instead of the profit.
Yeah.
So, I think there's some problems that are going to occur there. And what I really, really worry about is, at a certain point, football, for example, is going to get so expensive that you're going to have schools that are just going to say, we just can't do it anymore.
Right.
I think, my prediction is that we're going to end up, if things keep going on the path that they're on right now, we're going to end up with about 36 to 48 total schools that are stick with football. I mean, think about it. You can do basketball is a whole lot more. They're going to say, we're going to be good at basketball and we're going to really work on that. And I think you're going to eventually see, but
don't a lot of those programs rely on football for revenue?
Some, if you go look at the finances, lots of schools are losing money on their athletic department. We're obviously in need of additional revenue when, they just did the student fee, and I know everyone else has one as well. But I mean, we're having to raise revenue from, student fees and that kind of thing, which means, that we're trying to, we're pulling every lever we can to stay in the black, moving forward. But there's lots of schools that operate at a, in deficit, the red and at a deficit. So, I'm also worried that, eventually it's going to be like, hey, you know what? Golf's now a club sport, X, Y, and Z, track and field, we might have a club now that your varsity athletic programs are going to shrink because all the revenue is going to be needing to go to the 3 or 4 big sports that you're in. And again, on this path, it's going to be really, really, really difficult for schools and universities to, keep operating that way and providing that kind of broad-based athletic opportunity for students.
Do universities have limits on the amount of sponsors that they can?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to, you know, again, it's got, it's a crazy time. There's a lot to think about. You know, how will the federal government, you know, look at, you know, continue looking at enforcing Title IX with gender equity? You know, if you do start cutting, you know, we had that happen here, you know, when they started to cut men's track, and there were other issues in the background, you know, as well, where, you know, tried to cut men's track so we could save some money, and ended up, you know, with whatever the settlement was in the lawsuit, adding 2 women's sports and keeping, you know, men's track at the end of the day. But, you know, at a certain point, if you've got to, you know, make those decisions from a economic standpoint, you bring the number of male and female athletes down, you know, proportionally. You know, is there a point where, you know, they're like, well, you know, football is just a different beast. You know, you really just can't balance that out. You know, what I'm, you know, say afraid, but not really afraid of, is that you end up with, you know, a lot of schools are going to have football, maybe men's and women's basketball. You might have baseball, softball, and, you know, maybe like women's rowing or something like that to balance out football if you do. And you, again, everything else becomes a club. And there's good and bad. There's good and bad to that. But, you know, again, it's the path we're on right now is pretty, I think that's a realistic possibility for a lot of schools. Thankfully, you know, Clemson's doing well, pretty well, but, you know, you think about there's 120 schools out there in Division I, and they ain't all Clemson's. They're not all Alabamas. So you're gonna see that nationwide. You know, I think we'll be fine here, and, you know, if we're making those decisions, it'll be down the road. But it'll be interesting to watch.
Well, guess what? I did not think that we would go through an hour this quick.
Yeah.
I think we need to do this again.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of things that I was thinking about while you were talking that we could discuss. You open to doing this again?
That'd be great.
Yeah, I'd like to keep this. I know you're busy, and try to keep this to an hour. So I think we'll just try to reconvene another day.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. No, this has been great, Bob. Like I said, I'm usually seeing you in a social setting, and I don't get to hear you talk shop so very often. So I hear you cracking
just
jokes.
Just being dumb.
Yeah. So I'm actually gained a whole new respect for you.
Don't do that.
What a
That's
pleasant
boring.
surprise.
That's boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll definitely do it again. I do have a tremendous amount of respect for Bob. He's been a good friend for a long time, and he's a really good guy, in spite of what some people may say. But he's an awesome guy, and I'm proud to be his friend. So, but thanks again for coming on, and this has been another edition of Experience Matters with Eric Newton.